We are live-ish? Are we? Guys and gals, you know the drill. And non-binary pals. I've just started saying that. It's like my catchphrase. You know, like in those 80s sitcoms, Fonzi will walk in. Actually, that was more late 70s. You know, I like to date myself. Start a show by dating myself, how incredibly old I am at 49. You know, Sunday, Monday, happy days. And he comes in and, hey, hits the thing. The jukebox comes on. You know, there was an episode. I was talking with Angelo DeLulo, who's been on the show many times, talking about awakening. And we were the same age. And he asked me a question. He said, what was the most disturbing 80s sitcom episode you remember that really threw you for a loop because you were young, you were impressionable, like shit was getting real in the 80s? Because they had some intense stuff. And I had a few thoughts, but the one that popped in my head was different than the one that immediately popped into Angelo's head. So Angelo cited, and you guys who remember this will remember this. It was, thank you, Princess Hannah, for the $10 super chat. That's very kind of you. It was an episode of Different Strokes where, like, there was a bicycle shop owner, this kind of old man who was kind of chubby and bald. And I remember this because Angelo sent me a link to the thing. And he had enticed Arnold and his friend through friendliness to come to the bike shop. And I remember this episode because it was a very special episode of Different Strokes. And the guy basically gets them drunk and tries to molest them. And it was so graphic. Like, the whole thing was so graphic. You were just like, oh. And so Angela was like, yeah, that one, scarred for life. And I was like, yeah, that was good. That was very disturbing one. But what really got me, like, even worse than that, and this just probably speaks to how strange I am, but it was the episode of Happy Days where Arthur Fonzarelli, who had been established in the minds of all young children, all young boys, as the apex of male masculinity at that time, with his vinyl-looking leather jacket, his 50s swagger, the slick back hair, complete control of the situation, walks in, snaps his fingers, two girls jump on board, hits the wall, the jukebox plays some cool shit. Like, the Fonz was the apex, not just male sort of apex of, the asymptote that young boys were striving to be, but the apex of humanity. As far as I was concerned, the Fonz was that, all right? Well, so what was the most disturbing episode I remember from my childhood was when Robin Williams came to an episode of Happy Days as Mork from Ork. And he was an alien. And he came down and was causing some kind of havoc, as I recall, doing his thing, Mork from Ork, Nanu and all that. But he was vaguely sinister in the first episode that he ever appeared in, which was the Happy Days episode. And you guys who remember this will remember this. And so the Fonz was enlisted to try to kind of battle this guy. And they had kind of a cool off. Like, the Fonz came in and he was like, hey, and he turns on the jukebox. And Mork from Ork was like, and does something and, like, turns it off or turns off the lights or does some shit that you're like, what? Did he just out Fonz the Fonz? And then it got worse. He starts controlling, like puppeting Fonzie, like walks him out the door. And I was like, no, all stability, all sense of security, safety, like what's real, all crumbled that night when I watched that Happy Days. And so I was laughing my ass off. I'm like, well, that was just weirdly traumatic. And then, of course, he gets the spinoff episode where he's a good guy and he ages backwards and he's adorable and Pam Dauber and the whole thing. But at the time, it was really scary because it kind of rocks your foundation of what's safety. And this has a point. I don't know why I was talking about this. I had no plan coming into this live. I was just going to do Q&A, which we'll do. But it got me thinking because I've been reading my friend David Fuller, who hosts the podcast Rebel Wisdom, has been in the Bay Area. He came in from the UK and has been doing some things here. And so we had lunch the other day and he's like, hey, we were talking about all kinds of things. By the way, he is fantastic and really awake and really also into personal development, personal growth, those kind of things, which are, what else do you have to do in life except for, beat off? There's really nothing else. And so, oh, by the way, Ann Cairns, The Fonz's friends hung off him. He is the rock. Exactly. He was the center of gravity of that whole, the whole diner. And Richie Cunningham and all of them. I mean, Fonz was the sun. And to see this interloper with ill intent just easily destabilize the whole thing, in many ways, that was the archetypal Joker. So, the kind of figure that pulls the rug out. He's kind of funny, but he does it in a way that kind of points out how ridiculous the grand illusion really is. Like this idea that Fonzie has superpowers and is super cool and is somehow permanent and lasting and stable and solid and independent. Nope, poof, all gone in a flash when Mork from Mork just like puppets him out the door and like shows him all his powers are bullshit. And it was like, oh. And sometimes you need that. So I was talking to David Fuller and we were talking about personality and ego and how it's this kind of veneer that we see through. We see life through as the awareness that we fundamentally are. Awareness kind of sees the world through this lens of personality, which is a kind of an ego function. It's not a thing, it's a process, it's an ongoing dynamic. And to a large degree, a lot of it is inherited. Some of it is conditioned by our childhood and things like that. And so there's this, there are many different ways to think about, oh, by the way, yeah, Lizette, who was at our retreat, Erica Black, one of my supporters, who, by the way, if you haven't joined the supporter tribe, you need to do that because it's awesome. She made me this shirt after I showed her when we were on retreat. I had a little badge that we all used to wear at Asilomar in Monterey when we were walking around so people wouldn't talk to us because we were on silent retreat. And it said, I'm observing silence. So she made me a whole shirt because I was like, I'd love to be able to go into like public places and have no one talk to me. And here it is. I'm observing silence. This actually even relates to the story I'm about to tell you. So we started talking about different personality constructs, and there's all kinds of ways to look at personality. There's Myers-Briggs and Sparketype and all the whole range of crazy stuff you can find online. And all of them have some truth. Everything is a little true, but partial. There's no one theory that explains everything. We're always just kind of finding bits and unfolding the truth as we see it in the relative world, meaning in this world of form and substance and solidity and independent items apart from us. And we started talking about, he brought up the Enneagram. And I don't know if y'all know about this thing. So it's like this structure of understanding personality based on 9 personality types. And they interact in a kind of a geometrical way. So like, the 6s are connected to the 9s are connected to the 3s in a triangle, and they share certain aspects. Like when 6s are stressed and dysfunctional, they kind of change into more 3-like attributes. And when they're aspiring to something, they go to a 9. It gets complicated. The long story short is each one of those numbers, and you can look this up online and see which type you are. And what was remarkable is I'd known about Enneagram years ago because a lot of really smart people that I've encountered in medicine, like really high functioning, like kind of famous people, have told me, hey, what Enneagram type are you? And I'm like, is this some kind of cult? Like, am I gonna feel like somebody putting an ether laced handkerchief over my face and wake up with like anal pain? Because I don't need that again. But I thought like this must be some kind of scam. But quite a few very smart, high-functioning people brought this up, and they were like, oh, I'm obsessed with this thing. Like, have you read this book? Have you read that book? What number are you? What wing do you have? What this, that? And I'm like, so, of course, my wife and I, who were both physicians in training at the time, we first encountered this from a person who was, I think, a radiologist at the time. They were saying, oh, they looked at me right away after knowing me a little bit and said, oh, you're a 6. And looked at my wife and were like, oh, you're a type 9. And ironically, the 6s and the 9s tend to gravitate to each other for these various reasons. And so I was like, what? So I started reading more about it, and I was like, okay, what is a 6? And what's interesting about personality is often you'll read it and you'll read like the descriptions of it. Like the 6 is the kind of security-seeking, fear-based, high-anxiety loyalist, like very loyal, always trying to form relationships to create a sense of security, but is ambivalent about relationships because is also very ambivalent about authority. Doesn't like authority, but also wants to know what authority has to say. And it's very complex, and I'm reading through it, and I'm going, I hate this guy. Like, this is a terrible personality type. And that's when you know, okay, that's probably me. And you go through and you go, oh, none of them are bad or good. It's just this is the pattern of behavior that your ego mind displays. And again, it comes down to of 1 through 9, the primary driver, the primary fear of that particular type. So like 6's fear, they need to feel safe. They need to feel like there's a bedrock of security. They need to feel like they have some control over the world and they're not going to be cast into the void. That's their prime driver and all their personality traits often ripple through that. Now, everybody has aspects of all 9, but whatever the primary color is that they're sort of constituted, that's what you say, oh, you're a 6 with aspects of 5 or 7. And it's interesting. So 6 is that kind of security-minded person, and a lot of like stand-up comics, talk show hosts, they tend to be 6s. It's interesting. So like a 5, which is next to the 6, their primary driver is they need to feel like they somehow understand or fit into the world. And so they tend to be the rationalist, the scientist, the kind of a little bit off in societal, like we call them now, they're on the spectrum, you say. There's all these different pejoratives for what that person is. But they are trying to make sense of the world, but they're also very uncomfortable in fitting into it. So that's like one example of 5. So 6 and 5 are relatively next to each other. So you are more likely actually to have some aspects of 5 or the one 7. 7 is the kind of enthusiast, the one who's like really obsessed with experiences and wants to fill up the emptiness inside with tons of experience, like because there's this fundamental feeling that they are always wanting. There's always something to experience or to get. And so you go through all 9. So it's worth checking out for fun, at least, where you think you might be. There are simple tests and stuff, but even just reading the descriptions in some depth and seeing what resonates with you is an interesting start. And there are lots of books and stuff. But the question would be, Purple Sweet says, I'm type 11. You're not even on the scale. Hey, what's your personality? I'll go to 11. Well, why don't you just make like 9 the top and just make it the most powerful and just everything goes to 9. But I'm an 11. Yeah, Myers-Briggs, Gene Phillips, going to look this up after the live. Lisa Goodman, totally. Type 9 was also strong for me too. Ashley Stewart. Yeah, so my wife is a 9. So the 9 is the peacemaker. Their primary driver is they avoid and ameliorate conflict. They don't get riled up. They're kind of an even keel, this kind of thing. But that the shadow side of that is they can devolve into kind of stubbornness and introversion and inertness and not kind of standing up for themselves, lack of assertiveness. So each side has its strengths and its kind of shadow side, and each side interacts with the other personalities in different ways. And by understanding everybody's personality, you can actually understand yourself, first of all, better, and understand how this all plays out. Like, people are almost unfolding in a way that's software driven. And why do I say that? Because it sounds very reductionist to say that. I say it because I think it's very likely true. So imagine this: we're all primarily, and it doesn't matter what religion you are, whether you're a scientist, whether you're an atheist, whether you're a Christian, whether you're a Sufi mystic, most of the traditions point to this fundamental truth that we are not just this. Even hardcore agnostic atheists, like I used to very much strongly be, would be like, there's something up here. Like, you can feel it when you look inside. There's something that we're made of that isn't reducible to stuff. And so if we're fundamentally this kind of divine, open consciousness, spirit, use whatever word you like. Use no word, say void, say whatever you like. But that's what we ultimately is awake, is perceiving everything, right? Then personality is kind of like an adaptation of a pattern of energy that springs out of it that interacts with this world of, form. And it allows us to feel like we're safe or functional or whatever. And each of our type has a primary fear that it needs to feel safe from or needs to accomplish, that then spins up a personality around it that tries to accomplish this. Young children who are heavily traumatized or have gone through terrible things may in fact have stronger personality constructs that are more rigid because they're there to protect them, right? Whereas if you had maybe a more even-keeled childhood or whatever, or different parenting or different genetics, you may wear your personality more lightly and more flexibly and more fluidly. But all of us wear it. We see the world through it. And in many ways, that means we're blind to it. And in many ways, we then identify with it. So instead of seeing it as a pattern of occurrence that is a process that evolved over time to adapt to the environment, we see it as us. I am my personality. That's why when I first read about the six all those years ago, I'd never discovered meditation, awakening, trying to look at the nature of reality in that way beyond, the experiences I had in college and so on. And so I was just like, well, shit, this guy sucks. That means I suck. That's how I saw it. I saw it through the lens of the six, which is kind of very quick to pessimism, very quick to mistrust, because you're always afraid you're going to get hurt and that kind of thing. And I was like, well, I suck. I don't even want to learn more about this because I don't want to be this guy, right? And I was like, I want to be a 9. Like, 9s are awesome. My wife, she's a 9. I was like, I really aspired to the 9. It turns out 6s often at their best have aspirational qualities of 9s at their best. And so all this stuff, but you don't see those patterns. You're just like, you're lost in, I think I am this, and therefore I don't want to know about it because then I don't feel good about myself. But what if it was used as intended, which is you want to wake the fuck up. So you want to actually understand your true nature by understanding that this shell, this sort of pattern of energy that we wear, personality, body, the world, all of that, is just appearances. They're beautiful appearances. You can engage with them in the present moment. They're there, but they're just that. They're appearances on top of what you actually are, which is this unspeakable infinity. So how do you feel back into your raw self, your true self with a capital S, your being, if you're so trapped in this idea, and it is a thought, it's a set of perceptual filters and distortions that make you think you are your personality, you are your beliefs, you are your, so on and so on and so on. By the way, 6s tend to fixate on developing strong belief structures to give the world a sense of solidity and safety. So you may be hardcore like me. I'm alt middle. Like, I really think there's truth everywhere, and that's my belief, damn it. It's like, well, what if we just pulled that rug out from under you and it turns out there was actually absolute truth and everybody else was wrong? How would you feel? Your world would fall apart, just like when Arthur Fonzarelli, who you believe, that's it. That guy's solid. He's the center of the universe. You can't fuck with Arthur. He would stop the Fonz would stop a nuclear holocaust. And then this dorky dude, the jester figure archetype, comes from Jung's subconscious and just blows your mind. It's like, wait, what? That's why that was the most disturbing episode for me. Yeah, Arnold and his friend nearly got, sexually abused. That's terrible. And I'm sure for other number Enneagram types, that would have been the most disturbing thing, or for people who've gone through that abuse and that trauma. For me, it was Arthur Fonzarelli not being safe, not being a source of safety. And so what happens then if you can see your personality clearly for what it is? By the way, I love the comments are great because I only allow subscribers to comment on YouTube when I go live now. It cleans the thing up so much. Same thing on Facebook, cleans it up so much. Gene Phillips, great class I took at Cal State Hayward. Yeah. You took a class on the Enneagram? That's awesome, or on personality. So, okay, back to this thing before I get too distracted, because that's just me, ADHD, undiagnosed, or just crazy. That's probably a better diagnosis. If you see your personality layers clearly, if you can actually recognize them from an observer position, well, they start to become transparent. You go, oh, that's just the 6 in me that's why I'm feeling this anger rising, because I feel like, oh, I'm depending on this person and they're not there, or whatever it is that's your operating system that has been violated. You can watch your personality spring into action. The process is just, oh yeah, there's Yeah, there's that. And if you actually, and it's not a good idea to try to analyze other people, but it does, if you understand this construct, you can accept other people and go, oh, that's the 8 who is the challenger, who has to be kind of in charge because they're actually quite insecure. They have these certain fear pattern and they want to, you know, kind of be in charge, whatever it is, right? And I don't understand all the types yet. And then you can start to see these things play out. And as you watch them play out, if you meditate, if you're mindful, if you have a spiritual practice, you can actually become present enough that all of this personality stuff is unfolding in front of you and you're watching it going, oh, look at that. Look what Zubin is doing. You know, oh, the poor guy didn't feel safe when he was a little kid because whatever was happening and this. And so now he's born with a certain set of personality traits and this is how it's playing out. So isn't that interesting? So what's a healthy version of that? What's an unhealthy version of that? But what's the prime version is complete, open, divine spirit. There's at the core of it playing out in this way. And when you see the world in that way from that position, you know, from being itself, then it's like a dance of light and shadow unfolding. And of course, that's not easy because we're conditioned from youth to use our personality. Our personality is our shield, our way of being in the world, and we start to identify with it. And nobody teaches us otherwise. In fact, they teach us exactly to do that. We're trained from youth to do this, to use this as a shield. Let's take a look. Arthur Fonzarelli. Sandro Trevino, happy Sunday to you. June Black, as long as you don't start changing the way you think based on your number. So it's very difficult, right? Because by knowing something, things do change. That's why knowledge is such an interesting thing. By understanding, say, let's say the Enneagram is reasonably accurate, right? Which again, see for yourself, try the thing and see if it works for you. I'm still kind of re-looking at it because David gave me a book recommendation. I need to share it once I read the book fully. I've gotten like halfway through and I'm like, yeah, this is great because it looks at the Enneagram through the lens of spiritual awakening. Like how do you understand personality to wake up, right? And they say very specifically in there, it's not, you're not doing this to try to analyze other people. You're doing this for self-knowledge. And once you know, then you can see clearly and go, oh, that's this aspect of this. All this time, I never knew why I would act in these ways. I didn't have enough self-knowledge, self meaning this kind of self, this apparent self. And by seeing it, actually the underlying true self can shine through much clearer. And then you act, so a liberated 6, right? Like a dysfunctional 6 is like suicidal. A liberated 6, a highly dysfunctional 6, just feels so unsafe that they actually sabotage their own security, which is their primary fear, by seeking security and destroying all their relationships and doing all this other stuff. But a very highly functioning 6 is like incredibly hardworking, dependable, stable, and forms very strong relationships, is a strong teacher, is a strong advocate. So at their best, liberated, where they see, oh, I'm actually manifesting as this, they can clean up some of the noise in their personality that came from not recognizing their personality as what it is. And I think it's fascinating. I really do. I think it's an interesting path to explore. Ellen Hunt, or it could be like what happened a few years ago, uproar about some kids weren't passing math, come to find out the teacher wasn't actually teaching math. Oh yeah, I don't know if we're talking about something else, but there's that. I mean, you can't construct math socially. It's math. That's just me. Ann Hansen, see again, strong beliefs of the 6. Joanne, what's up, Joe? You need to understand your own ego structure to get beyond it. So this is a great statement. So you need to understand your own ego structure to get beyond it. I think that's true, and it's also somewhat incomplete. So you could say, in my opinion, and I could be wrong, by seeing ego for what it is, you realize you're not it. And that disidentification allows you to, you know, Andrew Holochek on my show, he's on a podcast only because our video was screwed up. So he's not on YouTube, but he's on my Apple, iTunes, Spotify, etc., the Z-Dog MD Show podcast. You can also go to my website, zdogmd.com/podcasts. There's a tab too. And watch this. We talked about lucid dreaming, but he's a Tibetan Buddhist tradition and been on like 3-year retreat and all of this. And he talks about it not as transcending, but subscending. So in other words, in the deepest sleep, when you think you're unconscious, it's really that, and he said this beautifully, the ego cannot attend its own funeral. So when you fall asleep, you go through the dreaming phases, et cetera, into deep sleep. Deep sleep, you think lights are out. But who thinks that? The ego structures that create memory and so on. And so they think you're just oblivious. But in reality, practitioners of lucid dreaming and dream yoga and those kind of practices, hardcore meditators, can stay conscious throughout deep sleep. There's they call it minimal phenomenal experience. They're aware, but there's no objects of awareness. It's just pure light, pure awakeness. Difficult to describe, right? As you would imagine, because the ego can't put words on something that has no ego in it. And so that state then arises dreams, the sort of unconscious mind, and then waking reality, all of which are manifestations of the deepest, unborn dream state. And so to transcend the ego is actually maybe to subscend it, to drop below it, and to then see it clearly for what it is. That's another way to look at it. And you don't need to do that to wake up. You can wake up without really understanding your personality or your baggage or your psychology. In fact, many accomplished spiritual teachers have done this, and they're highly realized from a spiritual line of development. They're awake. They realize everything is awareness, and they see things kind of even non-dually as no subject object from time to time, but they're complete raving shitheads. They're sexually abusive, physically abusive. They abuse substances. They're violent. So they haven't cleaned up the personality. So you can certainly transcend the ego or subscend it and not clean your shit up. So I guess, Joe, our point together is you better clean it up, right? As Ken Wilber says, you kind of wake up to what your real nature is, and then you grow up through lines of development where you're going from mythic magic thinking to kind of meritocracy to multicultural to integral, which I call alt-middle, this kind of seeing all views as kind of necessary and partial and trying to figure it out. And actually then understanding the psychological development, like not being an asshole, cleaning up your trauma, understanding your personality and your unconscious patterns of behavior, why your relationships are fucked up, things like that. That's part of it. That's a different line of growth. And they all are kind of important. So if you really want to self-actualize, you kind of have to go through all this stuff, waking up, growing up, cleaning up all this baggage, and then showing up in the world as who you actually are, this authentic being who expresses in this way. And then you just have no choice to be compassionate, equanimous, accepting, and loving. There's really nothing else to do. Yeah, Joe says, do the shadow work. Exactly, that's what it is. That's what shadow work is, taking the unconscious, bringing it into the light of knowing, seeing it, going, oh God, that's why I behave that way, or that's the trauma there, or whatever it is. Oh, you were on a tangent, Ellen. Okay, that makes sense. Joseph says, Henry Winkler's character as principal in Scream getting killed by Ghostface was such a comedic shock. Oh shit, I never saw Scream. That's terrifying. I can't do it. I can't do it. He's too important to me. He was great in Arrested Development, though, as the lawyer. Purple Sweet. So are meditation masters aware when they're anesthetized? This is a great question. I don't know the answer to that. We'd have to ask a meditation master. We'd have to put them under propofol and see, can they maintain awareness? Be really interesting. It's a great question. I've always wondered about anesthesia because it feels like lights out, clearly. Like, count back from 10, 10, 9, 8, and then you are in recovery. There's a missing part of your entire continuity. It's not like sleep. Sleep, you kind of feel like, oh, because there were dreams in there, there was some activity, maybe there's different levels of sleep. But with anesthesia, it's like lights out, lights on, whoa, fuck. What just happened? So it is interesting. Maybe you go right into deep sleep without any chance to kind of settle into that, you know? I don't know. Risa says, damn it, I just took the whole personality test and they want $12 for my results. You took the whole thing, Risa? You don't need to do that. I know there's like a $12 test online. You should have asked me. Although do it for 12, it's worth it. But in the book that I'm reading, which I don't want to share it until I finish it, because otherwise I'm like leading you guys down the wrong thing. But there's tons of books on the Enneagram. There's tons of stuff online. If you just read the like good descriptions of each number, you'll start to feel which ones resonate. And there may be more than one, right? And then you can take the test to kind of fine tune which one you think you are. But usually it's not too off. And what's interesting is I've talked to a lot of spiritual types, and a lot of them talk about the Enneagram as like, oh no, that's the one. That's a good one. Like if you're looking at personality, because it's pretty, it has a few advantages. One is it's not like astrology where you're like, I'm a Taurus, so I'm angry all the time and I'm stubborn, which I am a Taurus. That's static, it's stupid, and it's crazy. But it's not. In some ways, it's basically saying, okay, there are personality types, right? But we're arbitrarily assigning them to the time you were born and so on. What the Enneagram does is it says, no, you're kind of born with these particular proclivities and then childhood really solidifies them. Here are the 9 categories, but it's dynamic. They interrelate. So you have aspects of others, and when you're healthy, you show more aspects of this, and when you're unhealthy, you devolve into that. So as a tool, you could say, okay, what does a healthy 6 look like? What does an average 6 look like? What does a unhealthy 6 look like? And what are the danger signs? What are the solutions? What are the paths? And then in spirituality, you can go, how can a 6 through meditation more clearly disidentify from fear? Like not disidentify, understand that fear is a primary driver for them, fear and anxiety. And I'll tell you, it's crazy because, and I've told you guys this, like I've had meditative experiences where fear arises. Many people have, but for me, it's quite powerful. Fear is so strong. It comes up like, and it's unnameable. Like, what am I afraid of? It's like a fear of death, fear of annihilation, fear of loss of control, fear of abandonment, fear of helplessness. I don't know what it is. Fear of intimacy. I don't know what it is, but it's a pure fear. It comes up and it's guarding. I feel it right there. It's like guards the gate. You know, what did Joseph Campbell say? Or it was somebody else who said this. I don't know if it was Rumi or someone, one of these famous people, said, your deepest fears are dragons that guard your most precious treasures. And I think that's correct. And so understanding the 6 then now might focus my meditation into, okay, when I feel fear coming, that's a good thing. That means I'm getting there. The door's right there. Let me dive into that, right? So there's lots of cool shit there. Melinda says, I wonder how dependent the ego is on language. I think it's highly dependent. I mean, what are thoughts mostly? They're a voice in your head, right? And by the way, so type 1 is the reformer, the kind of advocate. And their kind of thing is they're afraid of not being good. Their primary fear is they want to be good and they want the world to be a certain way. So they're the kind of leaders and the activists and the advocates and the that sort of thing. And what was their mind is often can have lots of thoughts and voices that are saying, oh, you're not good enough or whatever, that primary voice. And it's language. There's conceptual thought, there's visual imagery, there's auditory thought, and and a lot of that is linguistic. So yeah, I think ego, the fuel of ego is dependent on language to a large degree. Although you wonder if do dogs have some ego? Do chimpanzees have some ego? You just don't know. They definitely have personalities, right? So, gets interesting. Sunday Runday says, taking the Myers-Briggs test changed my life. My ISMS finally makes sense to me. Isms finally make sense to me, and I'm less frustrated by others not thinking and operating the way I do. So what you're pointing out here is that self-knowledge is incredible power. If you don't take it literally, in other words, you don't go, I am this, because then it comes with its own blinders. You're like, well, I am this, so I can't change, or I am this, so I'll never wake up, or I am this, so that's just, I'm going to be a dick. No, that's not what it means. It means, oh, these are the tendencies, these are the patterns of energy that I in this incarnation inherited. And I see them clearly now. So when they're acting up, I can be a little more mindful, a little more response able, take a little space instead of just unconsciously acting out and blaming others. That's the other thing. Sixes are really good at blame. They project blame onto others. It's a common thing that I have done historically. And so you can recognize it and be like, nah. Ellen's totally down for any Doc Vader. Yeah, we'll try to do some of this week. Doc Vader needs to make a return. I need to tweak his suit a little bit. He's a little uncomfortable. Salted Paramedic says, when do we get an EMS episode? I am sure Doc Vader has some wisdom for my fellow Band-Aid bus drivers. Oh, Vader on paramedics? He's got a lot to say. He's got a lot to say. You know, he's like, which one are you, Starsky or Hutch? I mean, we could have a lot of fun. It'll be good. It'll be good. Zubin, what the heck is the name of that mic boom? It's sweet. Thanks, brother. Says Penhassen. This one? So I got this mic boom. I don't know the name of it. Hang on. It is really hard to find a mic boom for the SM7, because you're speaking my language now. I geek out about this stuff because I think I have a 5 wing, which is the nerd. Very hard to find a boom for this mic that attaches to a desk that isn't one of those fucking obnoxious, like Joe Rogan, like you've got a dick in your face. I don't want a dick in my face. I may need one, but I don't want one. So I found this on Sweetwater, great music equipment website. They don't pay me, they should. And I get a lot of my musical gear from them, and they're online, and their salespeople are really helpful. And I was able to find this. It's like $30, and I got 2, one for the guest shot. And it's heavy, so you have to really tighten it down. This mic is really heavy. Like if I hit it, it would just crump. So you have to be careful. But look at, I mean, full range of motion, and you can fuck with it, and it's great. So yeah. You get me into talking about stuff I'm actually really nerdy about. Pamela Hyde, right, holding on to an identity makes us closed-minded and deflects responsibility. Kind of like, I've got diabetes because it's in my genes. Yeah. We're all trying to find this identity, this story of us, belief of who we are. And yeah, that's actually, so this was part of what I wanted to say today is the world, reality is not two, in the sense that there's absolute reality, which is you are just empty, open, undying, eternal, awake being, presence. That's what you actually are. You don't have to believe me, because it's not belief. You experience this through any spiritual practice that you want. Sometimes through no spiritual practice, you'll just suddenly realize, oh shit, this is what I am. I thought I was this, right? So that's true. The absolute reality is that there really are no things. There really is none of this. It's just pure awake potential that you are. And then there's also the reality of this, the world of appearances. In Buddhism, they call it samsara. You know, Jesus refers to it as, I forget exactly the language he uses, but it's basically earth, right? It's this world as opposed to heaven. And the implication that Jesus made was that the kingdom of heaven is here because they are not two. This is an expression of that absolute. And you have to be able, ideally, in an actualized sense, see and work from both spaces simultaneously. So yeah, you need to know your personality. You need to work in the world. You need to pay your bills and your mortgage. You need to have a job. You need to do these things. But at the same time, you are absolutely imperturbable, eternal truth at your core. And so you operate from a base of equanimity, stability, and undying peace. So then life becomes a joy and adventure. Yeah, you get angry. Yeah, you get sad. Yeah, you have grief. Yeah, you feel emotion. You feel it unfiltered, raw, undefended, and you integrate it, knowing that, and this is the secret of bringing it back to me, the 6, and many of us who are 6s. The truth that the 6 learns through spiritual practice, any spiritual practice, meditation, mindfulness, yoga, prayer, anything, is that the safety and the security that they were looking for has always been there. It's what they are. And so knowing that at core they're safe and eternal, everything else becomes much lighter, more liberated. The personality still comes up because it's how they've been conditioned, but they don't let it dominate them. They don't let it hurt others as much. They don't let it hurt themselves. Now, my wife is texting me because she wants me to come home and I have to bring dinner for the kids. So we're going to have to make that happen. Hi, Tony Frankie. Vader on paramedics. Count me in. Miss you, ZD. Z-Dog MD. Just haven't had linking times recently. Oh, it's so good to see you, TF. You are the man with the plan. Salted Paramedic Nicholas joined the Super PAC. He's a supporter on YouTube now. Welcome, brother. If you are a brother, I don't mean to assume your gender. And although Nicholas seems relatively clear as a he, him, my daughter was asked on the first day of her English class in middle school by the teacher who's fairly woke, actually beyond woke, what are, everyone stand up and tell us your pronouns and your name. And I think my daughter might have said all of them. just to be her. My daughter, I think, is a 4. So a 4 is the individualist. It gets complicated, but she's just like, I gotta be me. I gotta be me. Their primary fear is they can't be themselves and be accepted. And I think this is true for her, but we'll see. She's young. All right, guys, I love you. I gotta go. Wife is yelling at me. 6 is crave stability. You piss off the wife, the home life gets unstable, wife and kids leave you, whole world falls apart. Good news is you're an eternal being. Bad news is you have to pay alimony. Not okay for a 6. All right, guys. I'm a fadist to black. And we out. Peace.